Welcome to this explainer. Look, most guitarists try to sound heavy by cranking the gain, but that's how you kill your tone. The secret to the Deftones wall isn't distortion, it's the physics of the mid-range. Today we're executing a deeply technical, forensic teardown of one of the most sought-after sounds in modern music, that massive industrial wall of sound perfected by bands like the Deftones. If you've ever tuned down and wondered why your tone sounds like a muffled swarm of bees instead of a stadium-shaking roar, well, you are in the exactly right place. We're stripping away the myths and looking at the actual physics of sound to show you exactly how to engineer a truly professional tone. Let's get right into it.
So let's dive right in and shatter the biggest bedroom guitarist myth of all time. Like I just said, most guitarists try to sound heavy by cranking the gain, but that's how you kill your tone. The secret to the Deftones wall isn't distortion, it's the physics of the mid-range. If you take absolutely nothing else away from this explainer, let it be this one thing. When you dime your gain knob all the way to 10, you aren't creating a wall of sound, you are actually just compressing your signal into this flat, lifeless pancake of white noise. It's totally counterproductive.
And that brings us to part 1, dealing with a really fundamental acoustic problem. Why exactly do ultra-low tunings just turn into pure mud? Think about it. When you take these thick strings and you tune them way down to drop C, drop B, or even A standard, and then you just dump a massive amount of high-gain distortion right on top of them, they literally stop behaving like a guitar. Sure, in your practice room it might feel visceral and cool, but the second you try to record it or play with a full band, it just evolves into this undefined sludgy chaos. Why does something that feels so crushing in the room suddenly sound so weak in a mix?
Well, the answer basically comes down to this one number, 46. Let me put that into perspective for you. An H-string guitar tuned down to F-sharp 1 hits a fundamental frequency of about 46 Hz. Now, a standard E-tuned guitar sits comfortably up around 82 Hz. But when you drop all the way down to 46, you are violently invading the bass guitar's territory. You're causing a literal low-end traffic jam. Your palm mutes are now trying to live in the exact same sonic space as a traditional 4-string bass. It's a full-on collision of frequencies, and the result is just flubby, indistinct mud right where your powerful low end is actually supposed to be.
This perfectly illustrates the massive difference between what we call bedroom tone and studio tone. You know the drill. At home, playing by yourself at low volumes, scooping out those mids and cranking the bass and gain. It sounds huge. It's psychoacoustically pleasing. But the studio tone, the one that actually cuts through a mix, like Stephen Carpenter's legendary sound on the White Pony album, that relies on moderate gain, high-pass bass, and heavily boosted mids. In a band setting, the bass guitar and the kick drum own the extreme low end, period. The guitar is fundamentally a mid-range instrument.
And this brings us to the place where your tone goes to die a slow, totally undefined death. We call it the mud zone. We're talking about that frequency range right between 200 Hz and 500 Hz. If you don't aggressively control your lower frequencies, especially when you tune super low and pile on the distortion, this area just becomes incredibly boomy and congested. Your fast, super articulate riffs, they get completely swallowed up by this boxy, woofy rumble that just absolutely ruins your note definition. And look, this isn't just some theoretical studio problem. Real players deal with this every day. As one user on a popular metal guitar forum pointed out, when you saturate low notes, they tend to get muddy. Try a high pass and some EQ between 200 and 500. They're desperately trying to fix that flubby low end. And the real takeaway here is that the solution isn't to go out and buy a more expensive amplifier. The actual solution is changing how you treat those frequencies before they ever even hit the distortion stage.
All right, let's move right into part 2, the practical build, focusing on the gain-to-punch ratio.
Okay, here is your exact roadmap to rebuild your tone from the ground up. Step 1, back your gain off to 5 or 6. I know, it sounds totally counterintuitive for heavy metal, but backing off the gain is exactly what brings back your clarity. Step 2, boost those mids up to 7. Seriously, don't scoop them. The mids are where the actual meat, the growl, and the real aggression of the guitar live. And step 3, let the bass guitar handle the extreme lows. You've got to stop trying to make your guitar do the bass player's job. By lowering the gain and pushing those mids, you unlock the true secret to the gain-to-punch ratio. You see, when you rely on way too much distortion, you're actually fighting the physics of air. To get a heavy, punchy tone that literally hits the listener in the chest, you need the physical speaker cones inside your 4x12 cabinet to actually move back and forth. But excessive gain creates this intense compression, which literally chokes the speaker. It flattens the signal out so much that the speaker barely moves at all, it just kind of buzzes. You don't need more fizz, you need dynamic clarity to literally push the air out of the cabinet.
That dynamic movement is what sounds truly heavy.
So to achieve this, top producers rely on an absolute classic studio trick. You take an overdrive pedal, like an Ibanez Tube Screamer or a Boss SD1, something like that. You turn the pedal's gain completely down to 0, and you crank the volume all the way up to 10. Then you place this right in front of your high-gain amplifier. You aren't actually using the pedal for distortion at all. You're using it as a clean boost that naturally cuts those flubby low frequencies and boosts the tight mid-range before the signal ever hits the amp's tubes. It tightens up the signal incredibly well, especially for those lower tunings.
Now let's wrap this up with part 3, modern EQ for low tunings, surgical precision.
When you're carving out your tone, high-passing everything between 80 to 120 Hz is completely non-negotiable. You absolutely have to do it. It removes that headroom-eating subbass. Next up is the 250 to 500 Hz range. This is where you make surgical, narrow cuts to kill that mud zone we talked about earlier. And finally, the 1.5 to 4 kHz range. You actually want to add a slight boost here. Why? Because this right here is where the metallic, percussive scrape of your pick hitting the string lives.
So, summarizing this modern EQ philosophy, it's all about intentional carving. You high-pass the raw DI signal to tighten it up before it even distorts. You use narrow Q cuts, meaning very specific targeted reductions, in the mud zone so you don't accidentally hollow out the whole tone. Then you boost those upper mids so your fast riffs stay super articulate. And finally, you throw a low-pass filter on everything above roughly 8 kHz. High-gain amps generate a ton of useless staticky fizz up there that just tires out the listener's ears and fights with the cymbals. Just cut it out entirely. Ultimately, the desired frequency energy of your guitar in a heavy mix means the sub-bass should be virtually non-existent, like it should be totally removed from the guitar track. And here's the magic. By eliminating that sub-bass rumble, you are actually clearing the runway for your glowing low mids and your aggressive, biting high mids to completely take over the sonic space. This is exactly how you sound huge without sounding messy.
Always remember that removing the mud is what ultimately exposes the aggression. When you clear out that extreme low-end rumble, suddenly that brutal percussive thump and chug of the pick forcefully striking those thick, heavy-gauge strings can actually be heard by the human ear. That percussive attack is literally the heartbeat of a heavy riff, and you can only hear it if you've cleaned up the absolute mess beneath it.
Heavy guitar tone is an exercise in discipline, guys, not excess. The physics of sound simply do not care how far to the right you twist that distortion knob. So the very next time you plug in your guitar, ask yourself, are you actually carving out your space to create music, or are you just suffocating your speakers with a bunch of noise? Stop hiding behind gain. Start building a wall. Subscribe to the Tone Manual.